Every month, Cyber Collective hosts creative research events to educate and inform on technical topics related to data ethics, security, and privacy. Thank you for joining us. Let's jump right in.
Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining yet again to a Cyber Collective event. We call them creative research sessions, but they're events, right? Anyway, we're so happy that you are here and we're gonna jump right in. So look, there are a ton of different ways to talk about our online safety and security and how that affects our real lives. And I'm going to assume that many of you here have seen or know the headlines about cyber attacks and companies getting hacked left and right. You've also probably heard stories about people's identities getting stolen, accounts online getting tampered with, and perhaps you've even experienced this yourself. So it's safe to say, right, that if you keep your information private, it could keep you safe from cyber attacks. Yes, this is true, but that's not the only way that your information being bare naked on the internet can affect you in your real life. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. My name is Tazeen Khan, CEO and co-founder of Cyber Collective. I'm also, I'm joined by Caroline Sue today, who is going to share the stage with me. And tonight we are presenting part 2 of our how-to series. And so last month we talked about how to privately use social media, how to understand this entire kind of ecosystem and how your actions online affect real life and your privacy. We're going to talk about a lot of those same things, but we're going to focus specifically on security today. So in this session, our goal, right, today is to help you all get that understanding, that big picture understanding of the importance of online security and give you the right information to walk away with enough that you can implement into your life right now, right after this entire session. So tonight we'll cover and give you a deeper understanding of how your small actions online can have really large consequences in real life. You'll get an understanding of the what and the why behind our most recommended security measures. And then we'll also leave you off with practical security tips for securing your life online. And all the while, you'll have a worksheet to follow along with glossary terms and information and all of our recommendations that you should have access to right now. Thank you, Caro, for doing that. And by the way, for anybody that joins these sessions and for our regulars, I know you heard me give that intro last month. It's a series. And also it takes about 5 to 7 times to hear something to really understand it. But anyway, there's going to be some information that's carrying over from last month's, right? Because it's just the entire concept. We at Cyber Collective really talk about cybersecurity, privacy, and ethics holistically, but we try our absolute best to share with you the different elements of these, let's call them genres, right, of this holistic approach. And so tonight's genre is going to be security focused. And if you missed last month's and you want to learn more about how to remain private while using social media, it's available on our YouTube channel. And very soon, we hope it will be available on our website and you'll have access to all of the worksheets and the decks from our events. Since last year, our anniversary is coming up, which is also a super exciting thing. All right. So our mission at Cyber Collective, we empower people to think critically about their relationship with the internet while helping them become more secure and private online. We accomplish this through our relatable content that you can find on our social media platforms and monthly creative research sessions like today's. And we actually have a few questions and polls that we want to share and want to know how you heard about us. I'm going to drop that in right now. But we accomplish all of this through our content and these events, right? And the approach that we take and what we find to be super special is our method. So our sessions are broken down into 3 parts. The first is educate. So we educate you on a specific topic and we try to make it as easy and understandable as possible. And then after we walk through all of the specifics of whatever topic we're going through, we try to, through poll questions, conversation, and the chat, assess where you are with that information, right? So are you understanding it? Is it making sense? And we try our hardest to make sure that everybody has a good grasp of it before we move on to our analysis. And the analysis part is super special to us. I mean, our mission is about critically thinking, and that's what we do during the analysis. We critically think as a group, as a community, because it's so important for us to ask questions and walk away with a better understanding, but also know that you're not alone in the questions that you're asking. And even as professionals that have been in this industry for quite some time now, we're still asking questions. All right. So a couple of things. We always like to share what we are about. So, and it's important to share our house rules. And in this space, we really, really value authenticity, inclusivity, and community. So please show up as you are, be respectful to those around you, and keep in mind that your behavior, words, and actions can and probably will impact a broader community. And for tonight's agenda. So look, we love social media. I met everybody at Cyber Collective through social media. And if you know anything about Cyber Collective, you probably know about my social media platform. I'm super open and I share everything. So we want everyone to feel comfortable using it. And there's some questionable things that I think we're all trying to figure out. And that's why we created this how-to series. And I shared that last month, a part of the series was about privately using social media. We talked about big picture, individual impact to a larger narrative, and practical ways to be private. And on tonight's agenda, we're still going to talk about those big picture elements because, like I said, you have to hear it a couple of times to really understand it. And I think that's the glue to get people to care, essentially, when you can understand that long-term vision and big picture. But the focus tonight is really on security, right? So we'll go through the small actions, big consequences, and then story time is an opportunity for us to hear from you all. We use a platform called Demio, and Caroline and I will go in and invite you onto the stage. But we would love to hear any experiences that you've had or of people around you that have to do with either getting hacked or it's not funny. I shouldn't laugh at that. But any type of story that has to do with these topics, maybe you have something to share. And we'll share some too. And then we'll jump into practical tips. Caroline will walk through a lot of necessary information. And we'll end off with surveys, some testimonials, and a few community updates too that we're really excited to share today. But our ask, look, I'm going to be completely transparent. After a full workday, we both have full-time jobs. It takes so much love, time, and care to build this material. And we do this literally out of the goodness of our hearts. And our biggest ask is that you participate if you feel comfortable. And so if you can engage with us in the chat, it really helps us stay energized throughout the event, especially when we're talking into a screen. So if you can help us humanize this, it means the world and we appreciate it so much. Any questions about the agenda so far? If you are still with me, please drop the funniest emoji that you can find into the chat. Oh, Lennox, hi. It's so cool to see familiar faces. All right. So anyway, let's jump in. Small actions, big consequences. I think that this can apply to so many different parts of our lives, right? Little things do have large impact. And in relation to what we're talking about today, right? Security, privacy, what we're doing on the internet, it's important to understand that some of these consequences we do have control over, and a lot of them we don't, right? Unfortunately. But today's focus is on the things that we do have control over and what we can do as both a community and individuals right now. But first, we have to understand the big picture, the why, and how our data is being collected and distributed, and kind of like what this all means. So we dive into this pretty deeply in last month's session. So again, I'm going to advise you to hit the YouTube channel to kind of get some more clarity into that. But for the sake of just some background today, right, the small actions that you take online have, it can be anything, right? It starts all the way from the applications that you download, the websites that you visit, the platforms that you leverage on all the time. And then that doesn't even count, right? Your work, your life, and all of the other things from our real life that are now in a digital space. We're living in what we call, not we, but the industry refers to as the metaverse, right? So our decisions on the internet impact our real life. And I think people are starting to come to terms with that. And Caroline and I will dive into that. And I want to also share that we're just going to be riffing back and forth with each other. And also, if anybody has any input throughout this event, please feel free to say something in the chat and we'll bring you right up onto the stage if there's any comments or feedback that you want to add. I can't see the chat right now, but Gato is in there with you. So your small actions, so the things that you do on the internet do affect you in real life. And so, our phones, for example, they're constantly collecting information about us. There is a gentleman named Mark Goodman who wrote a book called Future Crimes. And he has an entire chapter called Phones, Snitches in Our Pockets, because they're literally giving away information constantly. So what does that mean as far as consequences? There are a lot of ways to talk about this, right? If we wanted to talk about the ethics behind it and the privacy, which we do, and we will highlight on in some ways, but again, we're focused on security. So when you're sharing a lot of information, that means that potential attackers have the opportunity to leverage all of that information. And that's the scary part, right? Because what you're putting on the internet is affecting your real life. And we talk a lot about the different scams and attack methods in today's session. But before we dive into that, I want to share some of these. How many of you have seen a version of this kind of an email in your inbox? And how many times have you seen this kind of an email in your inbox? Raise your hand. All right, all the time. Are you seeing it in your text messages as well? And the voicemails? Okay, I would love to hear some feedback from people that want to share any experiences that they've had with any scammers trying to get their information, or anybody that's been involved in a social engineering attack. Those are, we'll talk about what social engineering attacks are in a second. But if there's anybody that wants to jump on stage and share their experiences, we definitely want to hear your stories. Going once, twice. Caroline, do you have any stories to share? Any experiences?
I do get really curious. I'm not gonna lie, because I do get a lot of like phishing links, especially over text message, and sometimes I get super, super curious. And like, this is gonna be such a nerdy, like weird, nerdy thing that I do, but honestly, I will sometimes like set up a VM and like it's like a complete for people who don't know what a VM is, it's a virtual machine. It's like a system within your system that's like completely segregated from all of your data. So it's like if I opened up like another Mac window within my computer, that's a VM. So sometimes I actually get really curious and then I copy and paste the links into that VM because I know that if I open it, it can't actually touch any of my data theoretically. And it's never worth it. Like it's literally never worth it. It's just like porn links or like, just silly, silly things like that. But I always do look at the privacy policies because I'm so curious as to how they're using that data. I see that Lennox is on stage. Share your story with us.
Hi, Lennox. Let me make sure. There you go. We can't hear you yet. She might be configured. In the meantime, I will share a story that means a lot to me. Actually, oh, there she is. Hi.
Hey y'all, how you doing?
How are you?
I'm doing really great. I saw some of the Amazon one and that's popping up, and I just feel like I'm at a point right now where I just feel like everything is a scam. So a part of why I'm here is to figure out, because we do use Amazon and IRS is a real thing, and I really can't tell what is real that's being sent to me and what isn't. Even down to my student loans, they call me every fucking day. Sorry, they call me every day, and I have no idea if it's like a scammer calling or if it is something that's real. So yeah, I just wanted to resonate with this picture up here because it triggered me.
Yeah, I love that you shared that. And listen, I use the F word literally all the time. You don't have to apologize about that. We show up as we are. But yeah, all of these, it's constant, right? Even I sometimes don't know. And the thing is, and we'll talk about how this happens. So that piece of the information that you share online, it's this like cycle that happens where they have so much more information about you that these scams get realer and realer and harder to decipher because of the information that they have. So it's this entire catch-22.
Right. So is there like I guess I'll continue to listen to the session. So I feel like you're going to answer all my questions. And if anything, I'll ask at the end.
Yes, 100%. We are going to dive into a lot, but please do jump in if you think that there's something that we haven't covered. Again, like I said, we have worked all day long, so we're trying to, push through. So
Right. I feel that. Okay, cool. Continue. I'm listening.
Thank you, Lennox. I appreciate you. So made such great points, right? As far as not understanding how to decipher, and we shared, I think last year, October, Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we were talking about the Netflix phishing scam that came out, and it targeted the Latinx community, and it came in Spanish. And, a big part of Cyber Collective's mission is getting information to communities that probably aren't getting this information, like daughters of immigrants, children of immigrants, our parents, and making this palpable so that we can tell the people that are really vulnerable that these are scams. So I wanted to share like how deep this is, right? That this isn't just about like annoying scams, but they're targeting really vulnerable communities, and it's super messed up. And that's why we're here today. I needed that reminder of why we're here today, right? So anyway, yeah, these scams, you get phone calls, text messages, emails constantly. And so how do your small actions impact these scams, right? Look, these scams are not your fault. I'm not saying that. These are the doings of other people with malicious intent, bad intent. But the things that you're doing that impact these scams. So maybe I'll answer some of your questions here, Lennox, right? So for example, what you saw earlier, they're called phishing emails, right? So Phishing, it's in your worksheet as well. So phishing emails are basic scams, right? It's information that's collected on you that is then used against you to get personal information or for you to take some sort of action that will give that attacker either more information or access to something, right, that they want that you have. How do you allow access to something like that? We get one of those emails. We don't know what it is. We don't take the time to assess whether or not these emails are real, and we click a link. And you don't even know at the moment in clicking the link whether or not, because it's not always going to be very obvious. It might take you to a web page that looks super legitimate, right? You click the link and it puts a remote access Trojan onto your device. So it can put malware onto your device. These are like really big words, just like basically think about like diseases in your computer or viruses, right? That's what they are, viruses on your device. So clicking a link can be really dangerous. And the hack. Well, Caroline, are you going to be talking about how to get around these things? Should I wait to cover that?
No, you can go for it. And then I think I have a couple other things that I want to add to this, how password managers can actually help protect you against phishing.
Okay,
we'll get
perfect.
there.
So I lost my train of thought for a second. Well, anyway, regrouping. So help me out, Caroline. Where was I?
We were talking about how, okay, if you click a link, you get phished. If you reuse your passwords, they have access to those passwords. And then there's malware, Trojans, viruses.
Yes. So clicking a link, it opens a door. It's like a portal into your information and to your device. And the way that you can get around it, that's where I was, the way that you can get around it. So instead of clicking the link directly, you can like open up a computer instead of doing it from your phone and copy and paste the link into a web browser. And then you'll be able to see the entire URL. And if it looks wild, right? And you'll also know if it's something legitimate, if it's coming from Amazon, it'll say amazon.com, right? And you'll be able to know the domain, the beginning part will align to the email that you're seeing, right? The messaging in the email. But a lot of times these phishing links look wild. We don't have an example here, but if you want an example while Caroline's talking, I can find a few and drop them in the chat later on. Using the same password is also a small action that can impact you very deeply. And we'll talk about that. And Caroline's going to cover that later. And then using the same PIN numbers. Okay, so this is super, super important. And this goes into some of the larger consequences, right? So access into your devices, identity theft, and phone and device takeover that people don't always think about. So there's something called SIM swapping. And the wildest part about this is that I learned about SIM swapping not through cybersecurity, but because one of my girls was trying to find out if her man was cheating on her. And so she legitimately called T-Mobile and social engineered herself to get access to her man's phone. She pretended like she had all of his information, right? So she called, she knew his security questions because he uses the same security questions over and over again. She had the last four of his social because that was her man and she knew that. And she called up T-Mobile and was like, I'm switching my phone. I got a new phone and I need to switch my SIM over. She legitimately stole the information from his device onto her device that is called SIM swapping, and went through his phone. And for about 2.5 hours, he had no idea why his phone went completely blank. This is a true story, okay? This is real life. My girls are wild, and we've grown from that. We're, you know, in our 30s now, and we're not like that anymore. But that was my first introduction to really like hacking that way, essentially, like in real life. I'm like, okay, do you want to get into ethical hacking? But the moral of that story is how easy it was for her to get in. And a part of that is your PIN number. So something that we'll discuss later on too when we talk about digital mindfulness toward the end of this presentation is that your PIN numbers and your passwords are obviously these gateways. And on your, like for your ISPs, your internet service providers, or your kind of like the services that you're using for your cell phone, you're going to want to call them like almost kind of quarterly, right? If you can remember to update your PIN number and make sure that you tell them that you don't plan on upgrading your phone or changing your device, and you will call them if you do. And giving them some information to notate into your account so that if somebody is trying to SIM swap and get into your device, they can't, at least because the PIN number doesn't match maybe the password that the attacker had access to. There are a couple of like more detailed ways to get around this, and we're going to be talking through those tips later on, so I want to save that. But you know, the biggest part, and then I'm going to switch over and let Caroline take over, is just understanding this entire ecosystem. So if you take a look at this, right, it's the little email box, people, and it's this entire cycle. So we can start with the email. So you start with a phishing email, and you fail to understand that, you know what, that's not a nice way to put it. You accidentally click a link that you shouldn't have clicked. And what that happens is there's access to your email. And then what happens? Access to your people and access to your devices. That device then gets access to or having access to that device will give access to your internal network. If you're, if it's an enterprise or a business, there's access to a larger kind of opportunity to take over. But perhaps through your device, they get access to your Wi-Fi network in your home and anything and everything that's connected to it. And then that data, right, like whatever access or whatever was taken, whatever data was stolen from you, can be used in a lot of different ways. And so that little, creepy looking kind of attacker that's there might sell your data into the dark web. They might hold your information ransom and make you pay. Recently, one of my really good friends just got hacked. She has no idea why. Her entire social media got hacked, and now she doesn't have access to it anymore. And she thinks that the access was made through her email. So it's this entire ecosystem that we're a part of that really affects us. And we have to try to be as cognizant as possible how the little actions that we're taking are going to impact this larger narrative, right? Because it's not just about you, but it's about everyone in your community. It's about everything that's connected to you. And we don't want to scare you. We don't want you to feel like there isn't a way out of this. And so it is my honor to introduce co-founder of Cyber Collective, Caroline Sewell, our resident data ethics nerd, philosopher, and author of our briefs. Take it away.
So far that everyone has dropped in the chat. Tazeen, maybe one thing that you can do is answer a question from Amna. Hopefully I'm saying that right. What exactly does SIM swapping do? Is it like controlling someone's phone and accounts remotely? You're muted.
Level, essentially what SIM swapping does is allows your phones there are SIMs in our phones. Let's start there. There are SIMs in our phones, and each SIM has a unique identifier, and it carries as much information as possible, right? So like the content and information on your phone is actually tied to this SIM. And so SIM swapping, what it does is you call and you say you got a new device, essentially, and you need to take all of the information that was on one device connected on one SIM and switch it to this new SIM that you have, right? So all of the content and the information that lives on that SIM, you now have access to in your new SIM. It's just like switching over a new phone. And instead of having to manually do it, your phone literally just turns off, because the service, everything attached to that SIM, all of the knowledge that that SIM has about your internet service provider, or whether or not you have an Android or an iPhone or what device you're using, your device no longer has access to that information. And there's a new device that's now holding the power. And that's essentially, it's switching over the power. And Caroline, if there's more that you want to add from a technical perspective there, please feel free.
Yeah, I think the only other thing to mention, I think that was a really good explanation. The only other thing to mention is that if you get SIM swapped, then that other person is going to basically intercept all of your phone calls and your text messages. So it's literally like if I took my SIM card out of this phone and put it into Taz's phone, then she'll have access to all my texts, all calls that come in, which we'll later learn in the part about multi-factor authentication that can be really sketchy. Awesome, thank you for that explanation. We'll move on into this tip. Our first tip is to use unique passwords for each account. So we're gonna go through 3 tips today. I can't remember what the other 2 are. Actually, I do, but we'll start out with this one, which is to use unique passwords for each account. And I will get to your question, Ashley, about suggested passwords in Apple and how safe they are, because it ties really, really well into this concept. So our recommendation is to use unique passwords for every single account that you have. And I know we have hundreds and hundreds of accounts on average these days, and that can be really tough. So luckily I have solutions for that too. But I want to start out with kind of the why behind why we don't want to reuse passwords. When we reuse passwords, we are essentially using the same key for multiple houses. It's like using the same key for your home and your work and your gym. It gives you, that one key gives you access into so many different spaces that you maybe didn't intend to give access to. If that one password gets compromised, for example, so if I use one password on my social media accounts and my email and my banking information, then if someone gets that password and email combination, they can just go in and try it on a bunch of different other sites and potentially gain access to a lot more information than just social media, for example. At a really, really, really large scale, credential stuffing is a common attack that basically exploits the fact that humans are kind of weak. Like we're weak in the sense that we like to reuse passwords, and it exploits that weakness. I will explain more in detail what that is. It's actually quite interesting. Again, we have hundreds and hundreds of accounts, and how do we manage all of this? Use a password manager. That is our recommendation as well. So going back to Ashley's question about how safe are suggested passwords by Apple, if I'm not understanding correctly, I think this is having Apple generate so-called strong passwords. And I'm inclined to say that if they're saying it's strong, and given that it's, X number of characters and it's a good mix and they don't reuse passwords, they're going to be pretty strong. It's more about how unique are they and how are you storing the information? So if you use one very strong suggested password by Apple for 5 different accounts, that's going to be far less safe than using one strong suggested password for each of those accounts. So it's more about how you store them and how unique they are. Okay, I'm going to talk about credential stuffing and why at a large scale, reusing passwords can be super sketchy. So In a nutshell, credential stuffing is a kind of cyber attack where a hacker or malicious actor or someone sketchy has basically gotten a database of usernames and passwords, basically a list. The ways that they get them can be really frustrating sometimes because oftentimes it's some website, some online service, and they're like, oh, actually, we left plain text, so like not encrypted, just a plain text list of passwords and usernames facing the internet, and someone got a hold of them. Sometimes people at those companies get social engineered, and then through phishing, social engineering, some bad actor gets a list of usernames and passwords. So once that's there, basically, the worry is that if you reuse usernames and passwords, they can go and take that list and say, oh, Caroline is using this account for Gmail. Let's go try it in Facebook, Yahoo, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And the scary thing, too, is that with credential stuffing, these hackers don't have to go in and manually do this. They have programs that run really, really quickly. It basically automates trying these passwords. They're very clever, too. They can even spoof IP addresses, so it looks like these people are actually trying to log in from a lot of different places, and it makes them fairly hard to catch. So that is what credential stuffing is, and on the screen I actually have a couple of examples that I found out my old email address was exposed in these data breaches. If you haven't heard of it before, there's a tool called haveibeenpwned.com. And that's where I pulled these results from. And you basically go in and you enter in your email address, and it'll show you, has your data been breached? And it'll also give you kind of actionable things that you can do to protect yourself against data breaches and credential stuffing attacks. The first one, my Neopets account got compromised. I might be dating myself a little bit. Like, I don't know how long Neopets is kind of around, but evidently one of my old Gmail accounts from the early 2000s got compromised in something that happened in May 2016, or possibly even earlier than that. So that's one. The exploit list, which is the next one down. This is a really, really sketchy list. I mean, it's got so many usernames and passwords, and it's like one of the biggest lists that got exposed. Another one is Adobe. It's kind of a good reminder that even the really reputable companies get breached. No system is ever going to be 100% secure. And while it is their responsibility to secure our data, there's also personal responsibility from us. So for example, using unique passwords, using password managers, that sort of thing. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. Taz, is there anything that you want to hop in with? You all good? All right, awesome. Okay, so again, the recommendation is use unique passwords for every single account that you have. How do you remember all of them? Because you're gonna have hundreds upon hundreds of username and password. Combinations, use a password manager. This is something that we talk about ad nauseum, I know, during our events, during social media. Like, honestly, I'll go on our social media and be like, oh, we're talking about password managers again. Like, we have nothing better to talk about. But it's actually really, really important that we do. And I'll tell you why, because I think we say it a lot, but I think sometimes the reason why gets lost. All right, why use a password manager? Number one, you don't have to remember your hundreds and hundreds of credential usernames and passwords. Number two, I actually think it's way, way easier to use a password manager rather than fill in my passwords directly every single time, even though my passwords from 15 years ago, I have on muscle memory, I still have that, but I think it's a lot easier to just have them be filled out by a password manager. One thing that you can do is if you have a password manager app on your phone, and if you've got an iPhone, I don't know what it looks like on Android because I don't have one of those, but basically what it looks like is you can just pretend like you're logging into an account and just click into the login fields, and it'll actually bring up a little button that says passwords, and then you can just use Face ID or Touch ID, whatever your phone you have, And it will automatically detect, oh, you're on this website, and these are the credentials that you used, and it'll autofill them for you. So it is significantly easier, I think, to do that, and it's a lot more secure too. Same thing for desktop, so you'll be able to use it on both desktop and mobile. All right, another reason to use a password manager is to protect your identity and protect your data. You'll actually be able to use unique passwords for every single account. And a nice thing here too is that a lot of times password managers will also be able to generate the passwords for you. So frankly, I don't know any of my passwords, and that kind of removes me from the system and removes me as a weak link, which I kind of like. It makes me feel good. If someone were to call me and be like, hey, what's your password for this thing, and try to social engineer me, I'd be like, truly, I don't know the answer. Because, you know, with a password manager, you can use unique passwords and generate them automatically. Okay, so a couple more considerations here. We got a couple questions, I think, last time, and just, you know, over the course of talking about these friendly little apps. Couple folks were wondering, is it secure to use Google Password Manager and Google Chrome's password autofill feature? Yes, these are secure tools. They will protect your data, and they will have your passwords and usernames down on lock. The only thing that you should consider here is that there is a difference between security and privacy. So while your information might be secure, and bad actors will be less likely to be able to get into your password vault, there's no guarantee of privacy because it's Google, and their privacy policy is not really geared towards actually protecting our data from being used by however they want. So that is a personal choice. For me, it bothers me, so I don't use Google products at, you know, wherever I can, including their password managers, because if I do, then they'll know, oh, Caroline has these accounts on these different websites, and that's what she's logging into and spending a lot of time on, which they probably have that data, but I just want to make it a little bit less explicit for them. For some people, really doesn't matter. So for that, it's going to be a personal choice for you. All right, so our 2 tips so far. Drop them in the chat if you know. I want to see that retention. So the first one is going to be use unique passwords and then use a password manager so you can generate and store all those passwords. You don't need to memorize them, and they get autofilled for you. The other tip that I have for you is to use multi-factor authentication. Let me break this down because those are a lot of words that mean different things outside of the context of technology. But with authentication, this is basically just logging in. So if you give a username and password set, you log in, that means you're authenticated. If you give the wrong password and your username and password, that means you are not authenticated. So authenticated, meaning you can log in. Multi-factor just means you've got multiple pieces of information. And so putting that together, multi-factor authentication is basically a security technology that forces you to put in multiple pieces of information to get logged into a website. And you have almost guaranteed used MFA before, one of them being, one kind of MFA being logging in with a password and a randomly generated security token that is valid for a specific amount of time. This can be a code that is texted to you, that is given to you over a phone call, and that might also be generated on an app for you. Another example of this is really common in banking accounts, I've noticed, where you enter in a password and you have security questions that you put in the answers to. Another one is using password and hardware key. This is really common in corporate environments where you'll actually get a key, little piece of hardware from IT, and you can push a button on it and it will generate those codes automatically for you. And I'll kind of talk about some of the benefits of these different forms later on. Okay. Why should we use multi-factor authentication? Because it seems like it's a pain in the ass. Like there's this extra step that we have to take just to get into this account that we probably have the password memorized for. Why should we do it? The first reason is that we want to make sure that it's really you that's trying to get into your accounts. If you have two or more pieces of information that are required and that are hopefully generated in different places, this reduces the risk of someone breaking into one of your accounts by 99.9%. Those are odds that we really, really like, and that's all because there's this extra layer or layers of security depending on how many modes of authentication are required. It protects your data, protects, for example, the contents of your email, which can be used to get access to other accounts. It's necessary. A couple other notes on multi-factor authentication. So actually one of the most important ones is not up here, but I did want to mention it. So when you generate codes, for example, and you get them by text or phone call or through an app, there's going to be kind of this trade-off between security and convenience. It's really easy to have a code sent to you over text or by phone call, and that's super simple because there's no extra app setup or anything like that. But Taz talked about SIM swapping earlier, and that is something that can be used to, if you successfully get SIM swapped, someone will then have access to your phone calls, to your text messages, and your multi-factor authentication codes potentially. So getting MFA codes through text or call is definitely better than not having MFA codes at all, because it's still that extra level of security and there's still the chance that it'll protect you more. But what's even better is using an app like Authy or Duo to actually generate those codes for you. The trade-off there is that there is some setup that you have to do with the app, but it is a more secure solution. So if you have questions about what potential products you could use, there is a page in the back of the workbook or the worksheet that will list a couple of product recommendations. And again, everyone's needs are different, everyone's concerns are different, so do a little bit of research and figure out which product and which solutions are right for you. Yeah.
Somebody asked about Kaspersky. So because given the background of that company and the brand of Kaspersky, am I pronouncing it properly? Their password manager is great, right? Like it's good. I think they're different people have like various pros and cons. I'm not as familiar with the tool, but online is showing that they have a really limited free version. They have a few form filling identity types and like inconsistent performance and weak browser extensions. So it's actually gotten only 3 like stars as far as reviews, and there are far more far better reviewed password managers. I can only speak to 1Password, LastPass, and Keeper Security because those are the only 3 that I have personally technically vetted. Outside of that, I'm just pulling information from the internet, to be honest. And it's really up to your preferences as far as the type of company, which organization. But one thing that we really do recommend, yes, free versions are good, but you're always going to get better protection by paying for a subscription service. And the way that at least I have managed the cost is I don't buy like a round of drinks at dinner one night and it ends up being the cost of a password management for a year in full transparency. So if there are more questions, we can answer, but I wanted to make sure I jumped in on there. Gato, there was another question that was asked by Lennox. IG also has safe password options. Is that safe? And I think that's a little nuanced, so I wanted to get your answer and see how you felt about them.
Are we talking, okay, so I don't really go on social media a lot. Are we talking Instagram is actually saving the passwords for you and acting as a password manager? Or is it something?
I think they act as a password manager. Oh. Just like, when it's like you just have to mark your photo and then it just lets you in automatically.
Yeah, honestly, on my phone, because I delete and reinstall the app so many different times, I've seen that. I I think that if you're going to do that, and I also don't know exactly how to disable that because it seems like it's a default, like it's just a built-in native feature. Feel free to hop in and correct me if I'm wrong about that. It's probably best, excuse me, it's probably best to use an MFA tool in that case to generate that code for you, in case someone does get access to whatever it is, your desktop or whatever it is, to just have that extra layer of security. I don't know what you think though.
The save password and automatically signing into Instagram, or staying logged into Instagram. It's really dependent on, I guess, like how many different places are you logging in from? Do you know that you're always going to have your device? And normally, if the threat is your password out in the open somehow, and does an attacker have access to that password, and then can they use it and log into your device? And so if you have MFA installed, then you'll get a notification on your device that, hey, someone's knocking and trying to get in. Allowing Instagram to save your password, I don't know that necessarily really makes a difference because they have the password and that's how they're authenticating you. So logging in and out shouldn't make a difference, or staying logged in. It's rather the upkeep and maintenance of changing your password and rotating it as often as possible. And that's where the password management tool is really helpful, or having the multi-factor authentication.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Oh, I did actually have one other thing on that slide. So one thing to note about your MFA codes: never, ever, 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 under any circumstances, give them out. Like literally ever. I'm very serious about this. If you get a phone call that says, "Hey, we're so and so, like my name is Kevin from IT or whatever, and we need your password and your MFA code to get into your email account," never give it to them. That is a very, very common social engineering attempt. It's usually someone from your IT department that is posing, or a hacker that's posing as someone from your IT department to get that information. To let you know, nobody in IT will ever need your MFA code because they have other back-end admin tools to get access into your account. They can literally delete your account, change your password for you. They will never need that information. So if someone asks you for your MFA code, don't ever give it to them.
Asked if she said, what if you're calling them for security help, and they know, even if you're calling them for security help, they will never ask for it, and they actually prefer not to hear it or know your password even when we're typing it out. And people in IT will be like, no, stop talking or don't say it. So they won't ask for it. It's your authentication. They'll quietly wait until, if you have MFA or something, until you let yourself through. But that's not something that they'll ask for. Are coming to the end. We are nearing the end. It's 7 o'clock in 1 minute, and we just appreciate everybody here. And if you have to drop, we totally understand. Please feel free to use the worksheet. There was a question about password management recommendations, and they're all in the worksheet and referenceable. If you have more questions, you can go on our website and click resources, and you'll be able to find additional resources and tips that we recommend. But an important piece of closing out is reminding everybody to be digitally mindful. So look, we can talk all day. We can give you as many recommendations as possible. We can tell you what to do. We can tell you what's out there, but none of that shit matters if you don't slow down while you're doing the things on the internet. None of it matters. You have to think before you click, and you can know. But if you're running around and just clicking things and not being mindful of your actions online, then you will get got. So that's really important. And then as far as access to yourself and how we leverage social media, right? Like these are things that are really important for us. This is where we tie in the holistic approach of ethics, privacy, and security just with our digital mindfulness, and misinformation, disinformation is a large part of that. But really, before you share things, right, on the internet, I'm going to be completely honest. This is from last month's slide and the proper information wasn't updated, but questions that you should ask yourself before sharing information online, right? Is, can this be used against me in any way that can allow people in? Will this give away an answer to any security question? So for example, like if you are a hardcore like university repper, right? And you have your mascot stuff all in your background and you're constantly taking photos, and then you use your mascot as a security question answer, that's going to be a really easy way to get in. So try to understand that what you're putting out on the internet, and then whatever kind of unique identifiers and these walls that you create, you want to make sure that they don't match up, so that your like outward internet life perhaps isn't affecting all of the things that you want to keep private. And then questions to ask yourself before really giving access to things, right? Does this app need access to my personal information in order to use it? Does this app explain why it needs my data? Check their privacy policy. People are putting together really plain language privacy policies, and it's pretty cool to see. And then, is this app clear on how I can delete my account, opt out, and request access to data being collected about me? This is really important information too, and a lot of ways that attackers can get through when we have like dormant accounts that are just kind of living in the ether and we never deactivated them, and it's attached to a super old password, and then they get into that account, and then depending on what that app is, maybe it's a dating app, they can pretend to be you online, right? So the deal with this, y'all, is the fact that there's so many different ways to talk about it. We can talk about personal things and hygiene that we can do. We can talk about the state of, organizations and their responsibility. And we might not always represent or tell the information in a way that is the way people need to understand it. And that's why we always recommend that you please, as much as you can, engage with our content and come to our events so that you can get this entire overarching umbrella of information that we also are trying to figure out how to share in plain language as much as possible. And it's a learning process for us too. So super important to us in the chat right now. If you have any feedback, we've been doing this for a long time, but we need as much feedback as possible. Please let us know. If you have nice things to say about us, please say them, because we are trying to get testimonials to eventually help us do some really cool things. And community feedback really helps that. And so last but not least, before we head out, I wanted to share that our friends over at Cyber Pop-Up are giving away a conference ticket to a Blue Team conference in downtown Chicago, if anybody here is in Chicago. And the founder and CEO of Cyber Pop-Up is a finalist for an award, and we want her to win. And so I'm going to, in a second, just drop the link in the chat so that everybody can vote for our friend. And thank you all again for being here, for being a part of this work. We'll stay on for a few minutes if anybody has additional questions, but we appreciate you, we value you, we see you, and this work is for you. Thank you so much, everybody.
All right, I did promise that I would talk about how password managers could protect you against phishing. So I mentioned how if you use a password manager and you go onto a website, it will offer to autofill your password for you. And the password manager knows to autofill the correct password for you because it's actually looking at the domain of the URL that you're visiting. So if you're on Amazon, it'll look for amazon.com in the URL. If it matches, then it'll put in your credentials. If you're on google.com, then it'll put in those credentials. One interesting way that password managers can protect against phishing is that phishing links often look like legitimate links, but they're not. So for example, using Amazon again, instead of amazon.com, it might say amazon-orders.com, which is, if you see a link that looks like that, it's usually pretty sketchy. The exception is if you see something like orders.amazon.com, which I don't know if that's a real URL, but if you see the dot before the main domain, you're safe. That just means it's a subdomain. That's a different thing. So if you see a phishing link, if you don't notice a phishing link and you're about to put in your credentials, but your password manager pops up and says, no stored credentials for this website, and then you check the URL, you're like, oh, that actually wasn't amazon.com that I was on. Super glad that it caught it. So that's actually one way that it can help prevent a phishing attack on you.
Oh, nothing. I was just saying I'm answering some questions in the chat.
Yes. There's another question from Amna. Is it typical for employers to require MFA each time for simply accessing your work email? I don't know what's normal for you at Cisco, but yes, for me,
it's so
definitely.
annoying.
Yeah.
It is so annoying.
It's so annoying. It's annoying, but I understand, like, it does make it more secure. And they will not only require an MFA token every time you log in, but also after a certain amount of time. So I think for mine, if I'm not logged in for like, I don't know, an hour or like maybe even something less than that, then it'll require a token again.
Thank you, everyone, so much. If anybody, we'll stay on about like 5 more minutes or so. But if anybody in the meantime, if you want to hop on the stage and ask us anything, we are here. And if not, we will wrap this up. We have so many cool things that are in the pipe and that we're working on and we can't wait for. We're a small but mighty team of now 5, and we have some super, super fun announcements. We have some programs that we've been working on behind the scenes that we're going to be releasing, and October is going to be a super big month for us. So stay tuned, stay alert. If you haven't joined or signed up for our newsletter, please do. And as always, everybody, don't get got. Have a beautiful day, and we'll see you again soon.